So, good afternoon all, good evening, and welcome to this interesting session on addressing gender equality and social inclusion in urban sanitation. Today we will be speaking about integration of gender in sanitation policy and implementation. We will talk about institutional mechanisms for gender equity in sanitation access, decision making, and also in the service delivery. We'll discuss today about designing gender-inclusive sanitation facilities and sanitation livelihoods and entrepreneurship in women. And for today's session, we begin with a kind of panel discussion. Let me introduce you to the panel members today. We begin with Dr. Y. Malini Reddy, having an equivalent MPhil degree and a management degree from ICFI University. She has been into academics for quite a long time, having remained assistant professor at NIFT, ICFI's Business School, and NMIMS. Later, she joined ASCII as an associate professor, and then as a professor, she has worked with us for 9 years. With 25 years of experience in management, urban governance, specializing in WASH, social marketing, inclusion and gender equity, ICT development, monitoring, impact assessment, with numerous publications to her credit, and being a member of a lot of editorial boards. And she is an invited speaker to many forums. We are honored, Dr. Malini, to have you as a panel member today. Our second panel member of discussion today is Dr. Shantanu Rath from Odisha, with a master's and PhD degree in human resource management and personal administration from Utkal University. He has worked with several organizations like Vedanta Limited, Power Transmission Corporation at Uttarakhand, Odisha Power Transmission Corporation Limited, Odisha Mining Corporation Limited. He happens to be a visiting professor at Xavier University and presently is working as a director at Odisha Water Academy. And our third panelist today is Ms. Mafalda Pinto, Water and Sanitation Specialist at ADB. She is a civil engineer by her qualifications from University of Lisbon, and keeps a keen interest in municipal wastewater treatment and water management. She has worked as a design engineer in private sector on international assignments in the design and engineering of municipal water, wastewater, fecal sludge networks, and treatment plants. She has a global experience of having worked in Europe, Middle East, South Asia, and her special interest is in wastewater and fecal sludge management, as I said, and especially focusing on circular economy in the applied sector. So with these three panel members, our moderator for the session today is Professor Srinivas Shari. I need not introduce you to him. So over to you, sir, to take over the panel discussion and talk.
Thank you very much. Just to set the context, as Dr. Banerjee said, we have, three panelists, but followed by the panel discussion conversations. We will also have another expert joining us, Ms. Dr. Anju Dwivedi, Associate Fellow from Center for Policy Research. Anjuji, thank you very much for joining. And she would be taking us through a framework for gender inclusion, the checklists, the templates that they have developed for the benefit of Swachh Bharat mission. So I thank all the experts on this conversation today. So today, it's a little difficult topic for the reason that it's often not clearly understood. The terminology is not understood properly. People have different views about what do we mean by gender equity and social inclusion. There's many terms which often I feel very confused. Some people call it as JD, some people call it as Jesse. So gender inclusion and gender equity and social inclusion. So I think the whole idea is to deconstruct and make it as simple as possible so that we can incorporate in our sanitation citywide inclusive sanitation program. But while we do that, we would have a lot of practical examples, not only from Orissa, where Dr. Rath will take us through, but also other Other members will speak about our practical experience of cities, how they are actually mainstreaming gender equity in their work program. Now, before I invite our first speaker, I would, Josna, would you like to sort of start with a poll question so that we know where we are, and then we will do the same poll question after the session to check if our panel members have done a good job or not.
So I hope you are able to see the question now. So I can read it out for you. The question is gender equity and social inclusion integral to your sanitation service delivery plan? So in your city or in your state, is this component included in your daily delivery plan?
This is somewhat rigged. Yes. Like many other polls. Josna, how are we doing?
We got 37 responses. Just a second.
It's increasing. It's increasing. So
yeah,
let's wait for another 10
yes.
seconds.
Yes.
Okay.
So we got 70%.
We are at 52 out of 75. Not bad. So 70%. Panelists, I think we don't need you because 70% of our participants are of the opinion that they're already doing this work. So now your job is to lower that 70% to 10% or even less. So we should take away that, okay, we haven't done much and we have to do much more. That is the purpose of this question. Now, what it means is that everyone is thinking that they're already doing it, but is it done systematically? Is it done strategically? Is it done with right kind of resources, right kind of finances? I think option of I don't know should be added to. Yeah, that's true. But this is, as Dr. Malini said, it is a rigged question. So that's why we did it. So, okay. Now, let me just take another 1 minute to sort of outline where this session fits in for the benefit of everyone. This is just to situate the conversation. If you see this slide, there are different stakeholders: senior citizens, women, children, people with special needs. So the conversation today is about, are we doing justice to all these stakeholder groups in our sanitation programming? There's no need to explain to this whole discussion about CVIS, but this whole conversation to situate this today's topic is coming under the broad building block called equity. Are our planning and implementation equitable, both in terms of infrastructure, services, budgeting, subsidies, and so on and so forth? Now, just to reinforce this point, I use this slide, and I would like you to spend 10 seconds. Is this situation equitable? What do you think about this slide? Anyone would like to speak about it? Okay, let me just put it this way, just to save time. All of us, anywhere in the world, whether it's Prime Minister to a common citizen or a person with special needs, or women, third gender, everybody has only one right, one vote in a democracy. Nobody has, even the most richest person will not have 2 votes. The Constitution all over the world defines democracy in the form of franchising, 1 vote, 1 person. But if you look at this whole road infrastructure is designed for one segment of the population, marginalizing the people who are actually pedestrians or even cyclists. Is this equitable? Absolutely not. In a democracy, everybody has equal franchising. Everybody has equal right on resources, but when it comes to a particular mobility, there have been inequitable distribution. Just to give you reinforce, you may understand that the gravity of the situation. I just looked at it, both from NHAI as well as census in Bangladesh, Nepal. Surprisingly, in all these cases, there are more females than men. When it comes to resources and sanitation, are we doing justice? Are we really equitable? Or is it like the road you saw, where pedestrians and some segments have been marginalized? I don't know about sanitation. So now I invite Dr. Malini to speak about basics of gender integration and gender equity and social inclusion, as well as some of your insights and experiences with regard to sanitation. Over to you, Dr. Malini. Dr. Malini is in charge of South Asia operations at Athena Infonomics, and she's a well-known authority on this subject. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you, Prisachari, and warm welcome to all the participants. Thank you for having me over. I must admit I'm in a lot of stress after looking at the poll. I just hope the 70 doesn't move to the other side after this session. So I'll begin my session. I'm going to request Jyotsna if she could play the slides so that I can have better access, to the chat box. And I hope you will keep the conversation going on the chat box so that it doesn't become like a monologue. So as Prisachari said, the title of the session really is Gender Equity and Social Inclusion in Sanitation. However, I would be focusing more on the gender equity component. The other members are looking at various other aspects of social inclusion, whether it is in terms of addressing the needs of sanitation workers, whether it is about looking at wage parities. So various other ways that fall under pro-poor initiatives, those fall under social inclusion, but I would restrict my conversation to gender equity. Next slide. So just a quick introduction. As Prisachari said, having spent almost 9 years at ASCII, I moved to an organization called Athena recently, and we are a global research consulting firm and have had the honor and pleasure of being very deeply involved in the development of the 3x2 matrix that Prisachari just shared, the CVS matrix. We've been part and parcel of developing that framework alongside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we have also been involved in developing a lot of monitoring evaluation frameworks and learning systems within CVS, in addition to a lot of other things. So if you need any consulting, come to us. Next slide, just now. Thank you. So I'm going to start with a very quick poll. My question to you here is that when we are talking about city planning, if we have equal number of seats for men and women in public sanitation, would that be a good example of saying it's gender equity? So we are following the principles of gender equity. Do you agree that it's enough to say that we have equal number of units for men and women?
We are at 60% responses, ma'am.
That's good, just.
I'm ending the poll.
Yeah.
This is like a pretty, this is also
50-50.
seems rigid, Doc.
Now, this is worrying me even more. I'm very stressed now. Okay, so this is a very interesting response. So the group, half of you feel that, yes, this is a very good example of gender equity and others don't. So let's look at a couple of pictures so that we have a discussion around it. Let's go to the next slide, Jyotsna. Yeah. Okay, let's just stay here for a second. Now, all of you, all of us have been visiting, maybe not really public toilets given our social status, maybe not visiting public toilets, but definitely we visit public sanitation units in malls, in offices, etc. Would you not have noticed that the queues outside the women cubicles are always longer than the queues outside the men? Why do you think that is? And even if you provide equal number of units, like 5 here and 5 there, you would still find queuing to be much more outside the women cubicles. So it'll be nice to just hear from you in the chat box. If firstly you agree, disagree, or secondly, if you agree, why do you think that is the case? Or if you just want to open up, it's all right. So you can just open up your mic and then just speak.
I think the way
women needs are different. Women take longer than men. Yeah, so you have seen the other way, Mr. Vivek. I'll just come back to you. Yeah. So common and the common observation would be that the way a woman's biological makeup is, the way a woman's dressing style is, typically in all cultures, a woman would require a little more time than a man in a washroom cubicle. Also, oftentimes, given the caretaking needs, a woman would probably have a child with her. Not that men don't, but probability of women having more children to sort of take care of in the washroom would be higher, and therefore we see this need. There is also behavioral aspects, particularly in India, where a lot of washing of feet happens and women tend to do more than men. So the typically amount of time taken by women is more for various reasons, which means when we're talking about being equitable, it's not just providing equal number of units, but actually seeing who needs more. Now, I'd just like to request Mr. Vivek to open up his mic, and I'd like to understand where he's observed that. Probably the location where he has observed this, maybe the number of men outweigh the number of women, but very curious to know, Mr. Vivek.
Very good evening, ma'am. I'm Vivek, and currently I'm speaking from Noida. Well, I have experience of working there in Odisha as well. So this is my personal experience, and I have just got to realize it that whenever I used to go for the public to use that public toilets, I hardly used to see any females around. So the reason could be because the insanitary conditions of the toilets would not motivate them to use that. This could be the other way, what I think.
Any responses to that? Any responses to what Mr. Vivek says?
Women are a bit hesitant to use public toilet. I'm speaking in terms of even my family members and the colleagues I go with. That's also
yeah. So, Mr. Vivek, you're touching upon another topic about comfort level of women using public toilets, but assuming there are equal number of women opting to use, men and women, in terms of actual users, of course, Margie has a different point of view. And I think the culprit could be the smartphone, Margie. We should look at that aspect, which is outside the sanitation programming. But Mr. Vivek, if you have not completed, please continue.
No, that's it. That's it. That's I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
We'll come back to this. We'll circle back if we haven't yet addressed your query, and we'll increase the number of men units wherever you are. So, so let's look at this picture essentially to say that requirements are different, and therefore equitable doesn't mean equal. We need to look at it beyond that. Let's go to the next question, next slide, Jyotsna. Thank you. Now, I've just put a question here asking you, are all men equal? So it's very easy for us to say compare men and women, definitely. But within men itself, there are so many different requirements. And if you really want to be an equitable society, a society where we say we believe in equity, then are we really addressing? You see an old man trying to balance himself using his walking stick. You see someone with a physical disability struggling. So how are we equitable by just not being able to address the different requirements, different vulnerabilities that we see on a day-to-day basis? Next slide, Jyotsna. Again, when it comes to safety, it's so easy for us to say, well, the toilet is well lit and it's ventilated, it has a door, and hence it is safe. For men, women, children, people with disabilities, everybody equally. Need not be so. Because particularly when it comes to safety, it cannot be defined in absolute terms. It is defined in relative terms. So in a way, what the point that I'm trying to make with these three pictures is that if we want to be an equitable society, we'll have to sort of start questioning everything, each of our assumptions. So we can't just assume that what is right for me will be right for another person, and hence let me take my decision. I have to find ways of engaging with other people who may have potentially other needs and bring them to inform my decision-making, and that's the single point I'm trying to bring forward with these three pictures to you. Next slide, Joseph. So whenever we are doing our sanitation programming, infrastructure planning, design of facilities, what we are looking at is, are we looking at different vulnerabilities and the intersectionalities? Let me just take forward Professor Chari's mobility-based and road democracy example and extend it a little bit. Suppose we are traveling in a bus and we have typically seats reserved for women. You may at one point feel, well, if it's a 20-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman, why should you have that privilege? That's fine to a certain extent. But what if the woman is going through her menstruation cycle? Maybe she's feeling weak. What if she's pregnant? It's just not showing, and what if there is some other condition that she has? So when we are talking about taking that extra step to include someone else, we are looking at, could there be a possibility of additional vulnerabilities which I have to take care of? So at a very basic level, it's easy to say we are all equal, but we are not. So therefore, the point I'm trying to make here is, let's make an effort to understand what are these vulnerabilities, and equity will come from there. Next slide. So this is a very popular picture, which is shown in almost all gender equity sessions. This is probably the first slide, and I would like to use it again. If you see the leftmost, what we are talking about is providing services without, yes, Professor Chari, I have a long way to go. Okay, so without really being mindful of what is required. Equality means give the same sized stool to every box for everyone to stand on. Equity means looking at the height of the people and giving them that additional boxes to stand on. And the last is remove all barriers. So what we are trying to do is, from moving to equality to equity, we need to take some additional steps, some affirmative actions, some initiatives to support the weaker, to support the more vulnerable. Whereas when it comes to liberation, you're talking about massive, deeply ingrained social change, right? Let me take some examples in the next slide. So here we are defining gender equity as provision of fairness, justice, in not just giving the benefits, but also responsibilities. So when I say gender equity, it's not just providing good quality toilets to women as a beneficiary, but it is also demanding that the maintenance of toilets at household level, for example, the responsibility be equally shared. So we are really talking about rights and responsibilities, and not just looking at women as beneficiaries. Do they have decision-making power? Do they have equal amount of say when it comes to taking decisions related to desludging? Where should, what kind of toilet infrastructure improvement shall we take up, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So here, if you see, and this is to the poll that I had asked, that whether you feel we are, we have gender intentionality. Let me just explain this with an example. And Mr. Rath would be covering more about this. Our members from transgender communities, right? Now, we construct public toilets and expect everybody, women, men, to be able to use them would be a very gender unintentional approach. We construct specific units, separate toilets for transgender community members, or we put up signages saying transgender community members are welcome, or within the same toilet block, reserve a unit for them. We are being a bit gender intentional. Whereas when we talk about being gender transformative, we are talking about the rights. We are talking about not providing additional facilities to the transgender community, but we are talking about making changes in my thinking and your thinking, because the problem is not with them. The problem is with us and our inability to accept them using the same toilet block that I'm using or you are using. So this gender transformative approaches require a lot of intensive work, policy, change in social constructs, power equations, and so on and so forth. And hence, typically, when all of us who are involved in program implementation and rollouts, we tend to focus more on gender intentional initiatives where we can sort of measure most of the outcomes, gender outcomes, more easily. And there are specific initiatives that can be included here. Next slide, just. Now, if you are talking about transformational changes, essentially we are talking about bringing empowerment. How do you bring empowerment? This is a framework which is proposed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which essentially looks at three aspects. Facilitate the process of empowerment by giving resources, whether it is education, exposure, opportunities, give them assets in terms of resources, in terms of money, to be able to build their capabilities, giving them infrastructure facilities so that they're comfortable and well-resourced, health-related contexts are seeing. All that comes under the bucket of resources. The second one is not just looking at them as beneficiaries and coming into the main work stream, which is where resources is, but also saying, how do we give them leadership position? How do they get into the decision-making process? Are they able to talk to each other, bring their voice and concerns to some organization or department where it is heard in a structured manner? That's where you're talking in terms of how are you listening to them, and their requirements. That's the agency bucket. And the third one is your institutional structures. Do you have gender intentional policies? Have you kept budget aside for that? Do you have a department or a center where women can go and raise their concerns? Where do they go? Is it a helpline or is it more than that? Where do they go to redress their concerns or place their recommendations? That's your institutional structure bucket. Next slide, just. So quickly, we're talking about gender equity. Are we close? Nowhere close. You can see the numbers. This is from the World Economic Forum. Even in the most advanced countries, we are nothing less than 100 years away from a situation where we could possibly say that men and women are equal. I'm leaving these slides with you. So on the right side, you can see which are the countries which are considered to be gender equity oriented. But the next slide, Jyotsna, will tell you on what parameters are they measuring this. It is on economic participation, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. And these are fair. So whichever organization's ranking system you see, there may be a little bit of change here and there, but in terminology, but the components are more or less the same. And I've put this slide here basically to appreciate our colleagues here from Bangladesh. Maybe when you have some more time, Chari can ask members from Bangladesh to speak about what initiatives their government is taking to be able to bridge this gap at such a speed. I mean, compared to all other countries, particularly in South Asia, Bangladesh is doing fabulously well in terms of, and it'll be fascinating to listen to them share their experiences. Next slide, please. So quickly coming to how can we achieve gender equity. Next slide. One, I've got 3 levers that I'm sharing and others would share others. So first lever is data. Next.
Only 5 minutes.
Yeah. So Jyotsna, you'll have to run along with me. Okay. Now, First of all, do you know who's excluded? If you don't, we need to measure it. So it could be women-headed households could be a vulnerability, religious minorities could be a vulnerability. Who is excluded? That's where you require information, sex disaggregated information. Next one. What kind of vulnerabilities? Is it social vulnerabilities, caste-based exclusion, or is it infrastructure vulnerability, that it is a low-lying slum and it's always flooding? So what kind of vulnerability? Who is most vulnerable? Whom should I prioritize? Next slide. Also, in terms of empowerment, it is not enough to say I have employed SHG and transgenders in my fecal/treatment plants. It's not enough. It's beyond that. Giving jobs is only one way of bringing women to the forefront, but there are a lot of other aspects that one has to look at, and I would encourage all of you to look up this study called Muse, which Athena Emery has taken up together in several countries, where they've developed a tool where you can measure systematically the changes in women empowerment over a period of time. Very happy to share that toolkit with you. Next slide, please. Second one, various interventions. And many of you are already implementing this. And as Professor Chari mentioned in his opening remarks, we do take up initiatives. And it's like a typical case study, you know, that we do things, but when we start to write it up, we write it in a very nice systematic manner. So it looks as if we had all thought about everything and planned it out upfront, but that's not how it is. Case studies just tend to show. So various interventions could be infrastructure improvements. It could be your city sanitation plan having a checklist of gender elements, which Anju would be referring to you, having a separate budget line, bringing livelihoods, various interventions. The point is, how are you looking at them in a strategic manner, tying them together, measuring the progress, doing the pre and post? What are those 5 things you're going to do in the next 1 year, and how are you going to measure it, and what impact is it having? Also, very importantly, what could be the unintended consequences of what you're doing? Giving a job to a woman need not always be good, at least for her. It could have a negative impact. Have we looked at the unintended consequences as well? Next slide, please. Some examples of good infrastructure facilities, women not feeling comfortable using public toilets, so exclusive toilets for them, mobile toilets from them. These are examples from Warangal city. Improving infrastructure so that everybody is comfortable. Next slide. Next slide, Jyotsna. Having gender forums, these bringing women into the livelihoods. Next slide, Jyotsna. Bringing them, again, having a well-planned structure and organization like MEPMA, which takes care of women empowerment and livelihoods programs. Mission Shakti, Mr. Rath would be speaking more about it. So this is various ways in which you could. And the third one is the institutional levers. Next, just as an example, I'll take this slide and then go to the last slide, Jyotsna, after this. These are 2 examples that I'm bringing from Sub-Saharan Africa, where a study on how many women are there in decision-making positions in the country led to a situation of implementation of a gender policy, and the number of women in decision-making leadership roles in Kenya over a period of 5 years of the program implementation went up from I think 12% to almost 31%. It doubled up. So this is an example of how a policy and institutional mechanisms can lead to a change. Similarly, Uganda has brought out a 5-year policy, gender strategy, and now they are at the time of testing whether this works and where it has supported. Next slide, Jyotsna. So in conclusion, we can go to the last slide, Jyotsna. Essentially, I wanted to bring a linkage to you between SDG 5 and 6. The previous 2 slides, when you have some time, please go through it. It will help you in understanding how SDG 5 are linked to 6. But there are 3 critical takeaways that I want you to go with. 1, the way to bring gender responsive wash or gender equity wash, as far as my understanding goes, is one, find ways of strengthening meaningful interactions, participation in decision making, as well as developing the understanding. Second, have transforming infrastructure, service delivery so that everybody's requirements are met, and the delivery need not be the same. It has to be different to be able to meet the different needs. And third, improve the data, because what you cannot measure, you don't know if you're doing well. Otherwise, it is only a feel good. I did this, that's great. But what systems do you have to measure that you're actually moving towards a more equitable sanitation service delivery system? Extremely sorry for overshooting, Professor Chari. I've usually, let me just say, everybody, that I used to be the other side and I used to keep ringing the bell on everybody. So sorry about taking more time, and thank you very much for your patience and listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is extremely useful to bring a common understanding on gender equity and social inclusion. Though you were not supposed to touch too much on the social inclusion, but I think these are so interrelated that these issues have been covered very nicely. Just like to articulate, reinforce the point that Dr. Malini has given us levers for change, 3 critical levers for change. And also she raised 3 important points at the end of her presentation. You need data, we need greater participation, and we need to have design thinking to make sure that our infrastructure and services are equitable and intentional. So I think we will take up some of these issues, but I'm happy to inform you that much of what Dr. Malini spoke and created a theoretical construct for us to think a little more differently, creatively, as we call as gender lens. Orissa government has already started on this journey, and they have taken phenomenal steps. They may have not followed the classical framework, but they've already done quite a few intentional steps, and especially in the area of not just on fecal sludge septage management, but sanitation in general and water also. So I think without taking much time and without revealing quite a bit of information about what Orissa has done, I now request Dr. Rath. He is hard pressed for time, but sorry, sir, for keeping you waiting. And then I request you to start the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words, and I'm really happy to be part of this conversation. I'm really grateful to Professor Chari and to have kick-started such a nationwide conversation. And of course, this is again, it has spread to the other neighboring countries as well, because as I see few international participants also taking part in this conversation. And just now, would you like to share the screen? I have
Sure, sir.
yeah, sure. So yes, so I thank Dr. Malini Reddy also to have made my job easier, because he has given a very wonderful conceptual overview and touching upon various aspects of the mainstreaming gender and also the levers of change, and also the linking SDG 5 and 6. I think thanks for making my job a little bit easier. But yes, as Professor Chari has already kind of given you some hint that yes, we are a kind of practitioners. So we execute on the ground, and thanks to the visionary leadership of our Principal Secretary, Mr. Mati Vatanan, and also who enjoys the trust of the also Honorable Chief Ministers. And one of the recipe to such success, I guess, has been the political stability over a period of time, and as well as the stable tenure, the trust. I think all these wonderful officers, I think the administrators, they have been enjoying since last 8 years. They have been in the forefront, thick of this great transformation that is happening in this FSSM and solid waste management, wastewater treatment space. So quickly, before
move the slides.
yes. I begin from a very, this is Mission Shakti, I think Dr. Malini Reddy also was trying to tell you that in Odisha, there's a silent revolution that has been happening. What initially appeared to be a, kind of a drop of water in 2001. So handful of women SHGs, they got together, and over a period of time, I think it has swelled to a massive, kind of a movement across the state. So the picture tells you, the faster evolution, the faster growth of women SHGs who are a force to reckon with and who are bringing about this social transformation, being empowered, being in the forefront of this water and sanitation journey. You can see the growth right from 6 lakh, SHGs, almost 70 representing 70 lakh women members. And I'll quickly link this women SHGs to the to the transformation that is happening across the sanitation landscape. So Mission Shakti, I think SHGs, they are one of the captive and very committed workforce, empowered workforce. And Odisha has already set a new benchmark in driving this community-led model in WASH. And as you see, I've already told you 6 lakh women SHGs functional across Odisha under Mission Shakti. That is under the Directorate of again the Women and Child Development. And again, you see, if you come to ULBs, urban local bodies, you find 35,000 urban self-help groups, functional in across the state. So what essentially, the Odisha has done is we have been able to leverage their potential and their, the latent potential in water and sanitation hygiene, and that this transformation from doing low-end jobs like unskilled and semi-skilled economic activities, and through a continuous capacity building, awareness, and motivations, they have taken over this technical and managerial role. And what you see here essentially is a very sustained capacity building interventions across the state through different agencies, right from identifications of the groups, then organizing exposure visit by city officials, and Odisha Water Academy also has become one of the focal point where we have exposed all these women SHG group as well as transgender groups to behavioral change. The first essential thing what we thought was to kind of build them, instill in them a sense of confidence that yes, you can do things better than your male counterparts. So that having broken that mental barrier, then we took them through this and so on and so forth, and followed by on-the-job training at the site. So that is how they developed that sense of confidence. And also there was a contract signed with different women SHG group to mainstream them into the sanitation values. So as you can see here, it is very much evident that how Odisha is trying to scale it up, and in terms of adopting a very low-tech and decentralized non-shared sanitations. And also at the same time, the engagement of SHG in entire FSM value chain has been very phenomenal. Literally 100%, of all this, what you see, these FSTPs, they are going to be handled by this urban poor communities and transgender. And at the moment, 58 FSTPs plants are being managed by women and transgender and persons with disability groups. And the rest 60 plants are in the process of the signing contract with the group. Next, please. Here is a snapshot of how the transgender SHGs and person with disability are then engaged in operation maintenance of STPs across the Odisha. You can see the contract signing. The secretary also Moha visited recently the STP in Bhubaneswar. And then the third picture also tells you, in Koraput also the persons with disabled members. So these are some of the, the pictures to give you a sense of, sense of what is happening across the Odisha. And as you see also, not only it is restricted to, fecal sludge and septic management, also in solid waste management, so far as municipal waste is concerned. So right from collection, visiting door every household, collecting, segregating, transporting them to the wealth center, and managing the micro composting center and material recovery facility. This has been another interesting journey where women SSGs have been largely involved, across this value chain, right from the collection to the processing, to the processing of all this liquid as well as wet and as well as dry waste, and converting this wet waste into compost, like that is what we call mokhata, and which is an organic manure, and this is also being marketed. This is being also sold across all the ULBs. And so sustainable community-led model, I think you can see very much, it's very evident it is working in solid waste management. Next. Some of the occupational safety, I think when you mainstream this gender, women SSGs and transgender, I think the occupational safety, health and dignity of Swachha Sathis and Swachha Karmi are also of utmost importance. Also, we prioritize that, and we make sure that they are also, they are covered so far as their health is concerned, because they handle a lot of hazardous works. So that is how across this entire value chain, all these sanitation workers, their health is comprehensively covered. Next, please, just now. Over and above also, these are some of the again pictures where we provide the uniform and the different PPEs also to all these sanitation workers and Swachha Karmis who are, and also there is a, in terms of providing a comfortable working environment, this is very much, hygiene factors, this is very much essential. So as you can see, there is a lounge sitting space. We provide clean drinking water, toilet, restroom, and storage cabinet for uniforms and PPEs. Next. And coming back to again the water, I guess that this has been another very interesting and phenomenal journey. And you might have heard of 24/7 water tap. I think again the women SSGs and transgender groups have been also largely involved in managing the operation maintenance of water treatment plant, and they have been also in the forefront of managing the distribution of water also. I think that is again Jal Sathis. Here what you can see here, the transgender community, they were trained at Odisha Water Academy and followed by on-the-job training. Right now they are handling this water treatment plant. I think the other day we invited also a team from ASCII. They have visited this plant. They have seen this happening on the ground. Next. Yes, some of the another also very wonderful initiatives of involving, partnering with the women and transgender collective, I think in the urban development and governance and Jaga missions, where the slum dwellers, they have been given land rights, and they have been also had given access to different services, municipal services like water supply, employment, solid waste management, and also sanitations and septic management and other municipal services. I think this is one of the very landmark achievement of the Odisha government so far as mainstreaming the slum dwellers, especially the women, into in the urban governance model. Next. Another significant feature also of so far as ensuring the safety dignity of core sanitation workers is called Garima. Garima by itself means that the self-esteem, Atma Swabhiman. So this is where we take care of core sanitation workers and regulating their working conditions, and also ensuring their welfare and social protections and minimum wages, and also how do we make sure that they are also, treated in a very dignified way. So this is one of the interesting scheme, and some of the services, some of the benefits that which the Garima scheme of the state government entitles them to, in terms of giving them housing facility, livelihood support, life insurance, and also free educations for children, then periodic health checkup and assured minimum wages. Next. Again, at the academy, I think academy is emerging as one of the one-stop solutions for training, for capacity building of all these master trainers, as well as core sanitation workers. So what has been the strategy of Odisha model is to build a talent pool of master trainers, certify master trainers, who in turn go across to the different clusters across the state to train this geographically dispersed core sanitation workers. Again, Odisha Water Academy is one of the,
Dr. Rath, just a time check, please.
Yes. This is one stop again solution, as I told you. Next. To cater to the needs of multitude of stakeholders, and in the meantime, within a span of almost 15 months, we have trained 900 professionals, and there are a lot of specialized training courses also being conducted. That is how we cater to the needs of all these sanitation workers and across the value chain. And all the good work also culminate in some amount of recognition, not only at the state level, regional level, as well national level. You can see the transgender Sila Bastia also, getting the FICCI Sanitation Award as the Women Change Maker. Next. I think that's all. I wanted to give you a quick overview of what is being done, what kind of practices we are leading from the front. As our principal secretary say, yes, we first execute, we do it. I think then the framework develops. I think all the practices finally fit into the overall overarching framework. So with that presentations, I think I'll stop here because of paucity of time. So over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rath. Friends, Dr. Malini has introduced what he called RAI concept, RAI, that is resources, agency, and institutional mechanisms or institutional structure as a part of the women and girl empowerment process. RAI, remember that. Now, Dr. Rath has sort of clearly outlined how this RAI framework is actually operationalized on the ground. In fact, I would say that he's right by saying that they take a lot of initiatives, and then people like us will try to fit into the framework and then try to match. But actually, what you see in terms of resource allocation, in terms of the power of collective and leadership development through training and capacity building, in terms of creating the institutional structures through Mission Shakti, all these are actually practiced in Orissa, and I'm very, very thankful to them. And many of the partners like Anjuji and Practical Action, they were all part of this development process. So this is fantastic for South Asia in general, how this has been operationalized. Thank you, Dr. Rath, for taking it forward. The framework that what Dr. Malini has introduced, now we have seen how it has been operationalized. Now, the most important thing is, how do you integrate in the development projects? This is fine. I mean, we heard the framework, we have heard the leading examples, but how do you sort of integrate in the projects which we take up as technical professionals, as city officials? Now we have with us Ms. Pinto, who is going to speak about the ADB strategy of mainstreaming gender equity and social inclusion in the development projects that they take. And she's going to give a lot of examples. Over to you, Ms. Pinto. How ADB is looking at it? Is it an afterthought, or is it a systematically thought through right from the beginning?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shari. Can you just confirm my screen is showing now?
Yes, we can see
Yeah.
beautifully.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to present on this course. It's really a pleasure. So yeah, so the last two presentations have been really good. So I'm gonna focus, although I have some slides in the beginning that talk a bit of what has been mentioned before. I'm gonna, mention them, but then I'll focus more on the examples that we have from ADB. So let me see if this is good. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So in ADB's projects, we talk about gender equality and social inclusion, which perfectly aligns with the last two presentations. Within ADB, we use this we call it the Seaweeds House, and we can see that one of the main bricks that we have there for the Seaweeds House is actually gender and social inclusion, which at this stage in this course, I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to anyone. But yeah, this is one of the fundamental things of Seaweeds. So to show here the Seaweeds projects in ADB have been growing alongside with the investment that has been done in sanitation. Although still a small percentage, it is good to see that there's a steady increase essentially. And as of now, we had 46 projects that incorporated Seaweeds, and 21 of those have been gender effective projects. In ADB, there's whenever you're preparing a project, you have to categorize a project, and it can be gender mainstreaming or gender effective. There's several categories depending on how strong the presence of gender equality is being shown in your project. Good reasons to include Jessie. I'm going to use one of the sentences that I'm sure we've all heard a lot of times in the last couple of years, that we are not safe until everyone is safe. And that is a reason enough to include Jessie in sanitation projects, but it also makes that the projects actually end up working better if everyone is able to benefit from the projects, then that's what we're here for, I guess. So sanitation planning, and how do we integrate Jessie? It starts from the beginning, we think. So first of all, when we're preparing a project in ADB, there's a series of analysis that we do. There's environmental analysis, there's social and gender and poverty analysis being done. So we need to know who and where are the most vulnerable people, where do they live, what are their issues, how can we address them, and then once you know, then you move on. In sanitation, then you go to the operation and maintenance. You have to ensure, as the last presentation showed, the workers you have to plan for their proper PPEs. You have to make sure that there's no discrimination amongst the workers. And then you also have to support the enterprise development. And we know that the small and medium enterprises are the ones that end up providing services to the most vulnerable. So that's where we have to support them. And we have to think even more carefully when we want to support women and make sure that they're involved in this entrepreneurial ecosystem. Then obviously Jessie has to be backed up policy and the law systems. The institutions that carry the Jessie flag, these have to also be supported by the rest of the environment. capacity development for women, being it through quotas or apprenticeships, internships, that also has to be considered. Consultation and communication. We have to make sure that everyone's voices are being heard. During ADB's projects, there's always intense communication with the beneficiaries to make sure that, you know, we hear everyone and we don't assume things, that we are actually taking the projects ahead, taking into consideration everyone's views. And then accountability. Those who do the GESI work have to be accountable for their actions, and for this we can use service performance monitoring. And then lastly, research. We know that we don't know a lot of things. There are instances where a good intention ends up hampering the development. So there's always research needed, and research and these less thought of topics is very crucial. Okay, so now going into examples from ADB's projects. So this one is in Nepal. This was actually 3 projects, all focused in small towns for water supply. The last one started in 2014, and it actually ended up in I don't think it was concluded in 2017, but the big thing is that in 2017, after this, taking into account this project, Nepal became the first South Asian country to have a countrywide regulatory framework for fecal sludge management. I want to say that the best way that we see to incorporate the GESI initiatives is like piggyback them on the other project. So you realize there's a town that needs in this case like a fecal sludge treatment plants. You go into that project and see what are the opportunities that you can include GESI in the project. What activities? In this case of Nepal, for instance, you had the water user sanitation committees, and the objective of doing an intervention on these WESCs was to have at least 30% women, making that these committees had at least 33% of women, and at least one woman in an important position. This empowers the participants, builds their social capital, makes sure that their voices are heard. Then it was also thought that the contractors should employ at least 15% of the total workers being women. And then, as it has been said, you have to get data. If you can't control what you can't measure. So data, disaggregated sex and caste or ethnicity was gathered. There were awareness-raising campaigns for WASH, and this included menstrual hygiene, which is always a big thing, making sure that people know how to properly take care of themselves and their health. There was free subsidized piped water or toilet facilities, and also public toilets were designed in sex disaggregated ways, with design friendly for disabled and women to go in line with the first presentation. Then generally it was also able to successfully mainstream adoption of GESI in all government funded infrastructure programs. Then moving to another project one in India. So this one focused more, this example ended up focusing more on the development of women. And actually I forgot to mention on the other one, for these 2 projects, there was a GESI action plan developed. So this was really from the beginning, there was a specific component of the project that looked at all of this. So in this one, there was an internship program at the Rajasthan Urban Drinking Water Sewerage Infrastructure Corporation, RUDSICO, I guess. And at least 500 college women could be integrated in this institution and gain professional experience in the water and sanitation field. Then there was at least the aim also to include at least 100 women, including from scheduled case and backward case, in other training, so that they could build their skills more in plumbing and meter reading. More awareness, gender awareness training conducted to the body officials. Again, household sewer connections included for the poorest people. This is always it's like an easy win. If you have a JC budget, that's an easy win. And then the management information system that was done kept throughout the whole project accounted again for sex disaggregated data. So get data disaggregated, so we're not making assumptions of that one data is applicable to everyone. The last example that I have is for Kolkata. This was a very big sanitation project, so I wanted to reach 1.5 million. However, 300,000 of those people were slum dwellers. So in this case, the main JESI components were actually associated with a resettlement plan. So as this project was being developed, it was understood that you had that large number of people living in precarious conditions, and with the project, it was seen as an opportunity to resettle them with more safer housing. So the housing was done in low-rise buildings, and it was aimed. It was ensured, for instance, that households that were headed by women or elderly or disabled people were located on the ground floor. These families were the ones that had lowest income and were living under the poverty line. So when we settled into the ground floor, they had the possibility of have a business from their house and supplement a bit more their income. Another thing that was very innovative in this project was that the leases that were done for these families, if the family was headed by a female, then the lease was given to them, and there was almost 3,000 families that had this non-transferable housing titles. This, it improved the sense of the self-confidence of women, and also ensured that they had improved their social status, let's say. There were self-help groups formed so that women could gather together and together also try to solve the problems that they all faced in. And this was also a solution that was found to combat an issue that usually happens when there's resettlement, is that the social ties of the previous community are broken, people are moved too far away. So creating these self-help groups helped create new ties and new social bonds, and so there was a better social integration. One issue that happened on this project, and this is could be one of the unintended consequences, as people were resettled far away from where they lived, there were issues around the people then having to go further to their old jobs, or they had to find new jobs. So these are things that have to be considered also when on resettlement, on cases of resettlement, there is also the issue to be considered that there has to be transportation. Yeah, wrapping up. Okay, so as I was saying, gender equality and social inclusion plans are a part of ADB's projects. Then there's always an attempt to partner with the local civil society through the NGOs. it's always important to find Jesse's champions, find someone that will influence and be a leader in the community on Jesse, disaggregate data, and then find the budget for Jesse initiatives. Without that, nothing goes, nothing happens. It might seem like a cost initially, but it will take you a long way. So yes, this is my summary. As social inclusion is a part of SIWIs. It has to be seen as a business unusual, almost, and always piggyback. If you're making a project, where can you include better social protection? And yeah, this is a thing that is embedded in all ADB projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Friends, you now saw how this Jesse, Gender, Equity and Social Inclusion Programming, is actually introduced in project level interventions. Many of us and almost all the cities on this in this program, we are preparing city sanitation plans. We are introducing infrastructure projects. We are introducing a number of women empowerment programs. Now, what Ms. Pinto gave us leads some ideas, and also she has not covered, but we are going to circulate to all of you the content of how to introduce this gender equity and social inclusion in different types of projects that they led. It could be a sewer project, it could be a water supply project, or it could be a sanitation on-site or off-site projects. But I think that particular understanding and perspective is very important to make these projects, I call them as sustainable. Sustainability is about also equitable. It's not just only continuity of a project, it is also make sure that it is very much available. Now, in India, a lot of good work is happening to convert these ideas into an index, to measure where we are and how we are progressing. In fact, Ms. Anju from Center for Policy Research, she is leading this activity as part of the National Fecal Sludge and Septage Management Alliance, and as CPR, they're working with the national government to create what is called a gender index and trying to integrate in the national program so that the program is actually becoming more and more matured as we progress. So without taking much time, I now invite Dr. Anju for to explain to us in a very simple language what this index is all about and how it can be operationalized at the state level, city level, national level. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Sarisa. I can share my screen if you allow me. Just let me know if it is visible. It says visible to all of you.
Can you take full screen? Yeah, now it's okay.
Yeah, so so very quickly before coming to index, all of you have made my work very easy. I must congratulate all the panelists who spoke. So I don't want to get into the details of what the inclusion and equity means. Dr. Malini has taught us very well what inclusion and equity is, and so all of you. Just that when we talk about all these terms and then try to put into practice, there is always a disconnect. We find that governments are very busy in implementing programs. They don't have data. They don't have figures to see. Like, for example, Ratsar has just told us about the number of SHGs and all. But within a ULB, how do they monitor that whether all SHGs are performing? Why there are certain weaker institutions there? What could be done to strengthen it? So the decisions could be made to strengthen all the institutions, agencies, so that they can get the agency looking at the right framework. So what I would just take you through this, this continuum of gender unequal. This is an extreme end and gender transformation, similar to what Dr. Malini had also mentioned. Though various donor agencies have their frameworks, and of course, the intentional, unintentional is something that we may refer to as gender responsive, where we say that it is becoming intentional nowadays to consider that women's and men's have specific needs. So different kind of programs and strategies have to be made in order to make these programs and policies responsive. And then moving to gender transformative, which is of course an ideal situation. And I would not say that India or other countries have moved there, but certainly some steps have been taken. And in our programs and policies, especially from Alliance or from our individual capacities, we are somehow working with the ministry as well as at the state governments to have a gender transformative lens where we say that the power is redistributed. There is unequal power and therefore there are unequal responses also sometimes. And to make it equal and equitable, we need to have gender transformative policy. Not that women should not be encouraged to be in SNCs and take up sanitation roles, but what about their traditional roles or their domestic roles? Is it shared by men also? So making or also, challenging the patriarchy and the socialization processes is also a part of gender transformation, which is of course, I'm not saying difficult to achieve, but yes, it is a long way to go. So over the years, just to see this pathway is very important, because to compare that where India stands now is also the fact that, from moving from WID, which is women in development, to women in development, then gender in development, there were many theories that came, which actually looked at the basic thing that these frameworks looked, and as they matured, to see that gender is both about men and women. And now, of course, we say transgender also. It is not men, women, but transgender. So the inclusion equity is now getting embedded very clearly from way many experiences have come from the state like Odisha. And also, it has influenced the various policies and programs, underpinning leaving no one behind, which is one of the key principles of our SDG goals. So just to say that, it's already been said, but just to see this transition, like till 2015, when MDGs were there was no proper goal on sanitation or on, gender. It was MDG, one of the goals in MDG 3, which said promoting gender equality and empowerment. But if you look at SDG, this has got embedded as two different goals. One is totally on women and the other is on gender. One is on gender, the other is on sanitation. And there also we are saying that paying special attention to the needs of women and girls. So there is a policy evolution, and all our collective efforts, mainly from the donor agencies and various international platforms, have at least tried to make even the governments think about gender and equity and transformation. So very quickly, all of you know very well, but I'm just saying that from though before 2008 there were so very social. I mean, if you look at social inclusion, there were many programs related to manual scavenging. There was a law that was amended, but just seeing the 2014, from 2014 you see there was an USP in 2008 which actually looked at their vision statement only said sanitation facilities for the urban poor and women. But if you look at the NUSP later and you read the complete document, it hardly focused on how that has to be done. Except the vision statement, nothing was there as clearly as now we find in various other programs and schemes. And so there has been an evolution from an SBM Urban 1 to SBM 2 Urban 2.0. There has been a major shift. And I think, if I'm not wrong, Professor Chari and our partner CFAR has also worked with the ministry to come up with the community participation guidelines. Then gender guidelines had also come in 2018. That actually states that there is a greater appetite even from the government side to do all the work which leads to gender transformation. So just acknowledging that we are moving on, and very rapidly. If you see, I think now NUSP 2.0, which is coming, has better features, I would say, than the SPM the NUSP 1. So just to see that how practice and policy keep influencing each other is something that is to be recognized. Just to take, before I go to quickly take you to this gender framework. So when we were working with the cities, there was a common understanding that, oh, all that is good, but how do we know that we are faring well? What is that parameter that you would say, okay, Puri is doing better than Cuttack, or Cuttack is doing better than Thin Canal? What is that parameter? So that made us think through this exercise, which we were helping at that time, the Niti Ayog also, because BMJF was one of the representatives there, to understand that you need to have certain policy framework, But those will not help only to have a policy, but how do you implement? So basically looking at, there is a need for gender inclusive policy framework. There is a need for gender inclusive planning, which all of your presenters have said earlier, that you cannot have a planning which is blind, which is gender blind. You need to, when you are making, whether it is a city sanitation plan or any kind of planning, how do you integrate gender needs? How do you recognize that there are different needs of men, women, and transgender? When you make up a toilet, a community toilet, does it cater to the needs of the women? All our hotels, all our public facilities do not have any facility for the transgenders. So basically, looking at all these components, need for greater political will that we saw in Odisha's case, that when there is a greater will, a lot of things can happen on the ground. Then we realize that just not having a representative group of SHGs or STs will help, but also forums for decision making to give the agency to these marginalized. So we have seen, even in the case of Telangana and AP, where the gender forums were created and all that. And then there is a need for gender disaggregated data at the city level. This is must. All presenters have pointed out this or referred to this, that we find that the cities do not have data. And when they don't have men, women, and transgender data, they can never, make a targeted programs for them. So it is a very difficult thing at the moment that we all are struggling. And we thought that it is essential, and that therefore, when we were developing gender indexing, these were certain things that we looked at. Then the gender sensitization programs, of course, are needed for everybody. But I think there are already so many acts and provisions, which also people or in the ULPs, not only in Odisha, but I'm saying pan India, hardly take cognizance of. Like when women are coming into the workforce, of course, there are challenges of being sexually harassed and all that. Are there, such kind of, is there any awareness on that? Not only awareness, but are there any grievance redressal mechanisms as per the legal, provisions in the cities or not? That is very essential, because we found that women in the construction work, when FSTPs were being constructed, complained about some contractors harassing them and all. But we found very awkward, but there was no such platforms to address their grievances other than asking only women to leave, because that could not be sorted out. So we saw that contractors doing that, all that happening in the city level. Then we also said that, you may have wash services and maybe inclusive also. One is they may not be inclusive, as we say, that then people who with certain kind of disabilities not accessing. But also even the community toilets which are built or are there in the communities, not open all the times. So one is that they are not open. So, and then they are not being accessible to most marginalized transgender and people with disability, who could be women also, women with disability. And then we thought that there are many programs, social benefit programs, which have to be linked for better utilization of resources. So when we say this framework of RAI, there is actually resources and they are in abundance. It's not that there are no resources to do this, but it's just that intelligent thinking of bringing all those programs together to see from where the resources could be leveraged to provide such kind of gender integrated or gender mainstreaming kind of framework. And then we felt that even the institutions which are promoting gender mainstreaming or gender inclusion or gender transformation themselves need to look at themselves to see that whether their staffing and their operations are inclusive, to include women in decision making and budgeting and designing, and also engaging women transgender into it. If they are engaging them in economic opportunities, providing them with this better skills is also important, so that they can further be employed in the gainful employment. Now, looking at all these, this understanding these needs, what we developed was a very long checklist. But with the ministry, we also are helping them with testing this checklist in some cities in Odisha. Of course, Odisha, because we all are working and there was a great political will and understanding. So we are implementing, trying to see that how these gender indexing. I'll not take too much time. Just that I just wanted to familiarize you with what we are doing this. There is a particular score and all that. We are not telling you the score sheet here, but here we start with that. All this that which we were discussing. That basically how many people are there employed in the ULB. Just to see that if the ULB has the data or not. We are not saying that we are forcing this on ULBs to get the data. Where there is no data, we'll say nil. Just to see that whether ULBs have any sources, because they do so much work and there are a lot of enumerations happening. can they just put together some kind of, numbers for us? If there are no numbers, they're still okay with it. But like this thing about population, men, women, slum households, all that, just to understand if there is a such kind of data. We are aware that we are finding challenges there to find out whether there are female-headed households, transgender. But it is important because this is one of the major things. If you don't have the data, you can never have a program which is very inclusive in terms of resource allocation or in terms of having an inclusive planning and budgeting. So these are all community toilet blocks that we have looked at, that whether how many. So one is that Dr. Malini was saying that are they equal or are they equitable? And sometimes we've seen in the community toilet, not in Odisha but in many places, where the community toilets, when are used by women, the charge of fee is more because women take longer time. They use bathroom for not only themselves, for the children, for cleaning, for washing clothes and everything, and they had to pay more for these things because the care burden is on them. So just to see that whether, how many seats are there, and also that amount of subsidy that is being allotted to the non-slum houses and slum households or female-headed households, tariffs for using CTs, like as I said, because urinal, and in fact, not only about washing and bathing, it is also about urinals, because when women go for urinal, they go to the, one facility only, while men have this urinals and, latrines. So they are charged 5 rupees.
Manju ji, आपका slide stuck हुआ क्या? Just one.
Oh,
ma'am, your Excel is not being seen.
So I can stop here and use then my separate Excel sheet. Sorry, I did not realize that it was not showing up. So just let me know if it is opening. Can you see now? Hello?
No, ma'am, it's still the presentation.
You need to take out the presentation and open it again.
Okay, so sorry.
So, Prasachari, I just take a minute to say bye to everyone while Anju sets the slide. Thank you very much, everyone, for inviting, and look forward to meeting you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Now can you see? Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
now it is.
Yeah, so sorry, I did not realize. So all these things I can share in any case this index, this sheet with you. But basically to look at, the complete system, that who is maintaining it, who is operating it, whether the institutions, how many staff they have, whether they are women staff or transgender staff or not. And we have looked at the complete, CTPTs, even FSTPs, what activities have been undertaken, whether there have been gender sensitive programs and trainings, whether there has been a POSH committee or not to address the needs of women workers or anybody, but I'm saying transgender and women. So this checklist, I'm not going into too much detail because it's a long checklist. But the thing is that we are administering this and also then looking at PTCT quality. Now, generally, as we were discussing earlier, that there is already this, there is a framework from the CPHU, which talks about all these indicators, and what we have done is that first we are trying to assess in terms of how many number of toilet facilities. Here we are mentioning about CT, those which are used by urban poor households, whether their entrances, exits, walkways, path areas, open areas are, accessible. They have separate wings. They have separate wings for transgender and women, whether they have toilet blocks separating. In fact, we have seen in many places, forget the CTs, but in the PTs also, nobody has, sensitivity towards people with visual disabilities and all that to have the separate, symbols and all that for people to use. So all these things which are there in the guidelines, we have tried to put together, looking at not only CPHU, but other, female-friendly toilets, water aid guidelines and other guidelines, and try to build that into an index. I mean, when people will score, we will have a formula to calculate how the cities look at this. And also PTCT with pipe water, because we thought that it was very essential component to see, because when you don't have a pipe water connection, then people tend to see, even if they have, tend to not go into the toilets, because then taking the water, going there is quite a burdensome thing, and therefore they then resort.
So
made this indicator, and also on then community toilets and who repairs them, where there are grievances, how it is addressed, how many times in a month it get addressed. And then looked at, then we thought that instead of going to all the community toilets, we'll ask the ULB to give us the 2 best toilets, which they think are the best according to their own, judgment. And then we go to these with a detailed checklist, and then, administer it in those community toilets, where we are looking at the menstrual hygiene practices also, whether they have separate spaces, separate entrances, robust structures. I'm sorry, I'm writing it because there's less time, not to take too much time. Also for privacy, also to see that women are, not, women are protected, they are safe in those toilets and feel safe, and well-lit places like Malini was showing in our presentation, water and hand washing stations, because all this is very important for any person to use the cities, including women. And we see there is a lot of interest to use cities, but people get demotivated if one of these or many of these indicators are missed. So just to monitor, just to see that, and then compare, and then have a score for the ULBs, and to tell them how it looks like, how inclusive your planning, budgeting, resource allocation is, and how your structures and systems are. This is something that we are administrating. This is first phase. Now there would be many more indicators which will be into the second stage and all that. So this is how we are going to do it. Sorry for taking time, but rushing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Anjuji, if you can take out the Excel sheet. Yeah, great. So thank you so much. Friends, you saw how Anjuji has explained to us a validation method, an evaluation method of the assets and infrastructure that we have created. Are they really gender intentional? Are they really meeting the needs? So they call it as gender indexing. And that really helps us to take up what is called performance improvement and gradually move towards gender intentionality and hopefully towards transformative strategy that she presented. So these are very, very useful tools to introduce performance improvement is one, but also to help us when you're creating new assets. This checklist will be helpful for us to, at that stage, when we are actually creating some assets. So I think it's very, very powerful. And once these guidelines and checklists are integrated in your policies, as well as in the state level, as well as national policies, then it becomes a new normal, and it will become a competitive, I would say, like the way in India we have Swachh Sarvekshan, every city likes to do it and compare notes. I think these are the strengths of some of these indexing methods that she has introduced. So I think this is fascinating. Are there any...
one thing?
Yeah, please.
Just one thing, Charissa, we, because it is in a pilot, so we also are learning in this process and we can improve it. So if any city wants to administer it just to see, we will be happy to, you have this indexing. In any case, I'm leaving this in the presentation, can be shared with everybody. So anything which you want us to support, we are happy to support and do this for you. I mean, like, if you
so want. I'm requesting you, please support Telangana also and Andhra also. So we will reach out to you because this is very, very useful. And this will help us to really change the current infrastructure and assets. And also the way we look at small things like tariffs, pricing. I'll give you an example. In a couple of cities that we work on a PPP-based public conveniences, the tariff is 2 rupees per use, but for urinals, it's free. But when it comes to women toilets, even for urinals, they use WC. So they end up paying 2 rupees, whereas in the men's section, urinals are given free of cost. So this checklist will help us to think, are we really gender intentional? Thank you very much, Anjuji.
And then you put more resources to build, because for women there's one facility, for men there are 2 facilities.
Exactly. So are there any other questions to our panelist, Ms. Anju? Are there any comments?
Again, just have 2 questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Child Nakib Singh ji had 2 questions in the chat box. Do we have child sensitive index also and disabled indexing?
Yes, so largely, if you see one of the documents I can share, there we have put the disability indexing or the disability indicators. But at the moment in the first round, we are only going, and here in gender, we are only looking at men, women, and transgender. But yes, in the second round, there would be more, such kind of marginalized groups because the city doesn't have data of even disabilities. That who many people are living in with disability. So that is not there. And of course, not at the moment, the child sensitive. One step, because it is very difficult to even make you will be think that, they can start with something. So those will come. That is in our plan. But at the moment, we are only looking at these.
There's another question from Sarika ji with regard to, testing some of these tools even for the Northeast hilly states. So she comes from Sikkim. So I think it will be, Anjuji, it's, I think, very useful to do some of these pilots in Northeast states also.
Oh, sure. That will be very helpful.
Yeah.
That will be very.
Anything last question to you?
Sir, my request is that can this forum represent to the Census of India to get such data, because Census 2021 is yet to happen. So that is my request, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very ideal situation, but I think Census has much bigger mandate. To begin with, if we can get this under the Clean City campaigns programs like Swachh Sarvekshan, and I'm sure all Bangladesh as well as Nepal, you have your own, what you call the reward systems. If we can introduce there, I think from there we can take it to maybe Census in the long run. So there's another question from a friend from Africa. Are you face challenges while testing this index? Great point.
Yeah, it is. We are facing a lot of, because this is a stage where they're being piloted. At the moment, they're being piloted, and we hear from the, our team, like TSU team of EY and us, who are doing it in various cities. Then, there is no data, as I was saying. There's a lot of problem. I mean, then when they think that there is no data on, men, women, and all that, so a lot of things are coming blank. But yes, there are challenges. But people are cooperating. It's not that they don't want to give data. It is just that it is not there. And if they are there, it is like, various data don't speak to each other. I think while having this, I was saying about the convergence. So NULM programs have different numbers for SHGs than, the very other program of Mission Shakti. So those are the challenges, but yes, that is coming through. And in fact, ULB is also acknowledging that there could be some challenges in data. But yeah, data is a problem.
So thank you, Anjuji. I think this has been very, very useful. We will reach out to you. On behalf of all the participants, I would like to thank, and I thank all the panelists, quite a few. I mean, some of them have to leave because of their prior commitments. Thanks a lot. This is fascinating. So just like to, I just like to sort of take a minute to sort of summarize what we heard today. As part of this course, we deliberately have this session upfront so that we start looking at all our actions. In the subsequent sessions, we're going to have planning related issues. We're going to have infrastructure related conversations. But I think having this GESI lens, gender and social inclusion lens right up front, maybe we'll start looking at our planning differently. We'll start looking at our investment programs differently. We'll start looking at our infrastructure programs differently. So that is the reason we have this session upfront in the program, and I thank all of them. I'd just like to say once again, all of us have equal rights. So there should be equal opportunities. Now this, please remember this. Resources are same. Everybody should get, but maximum resource allocation is going to one segment of population, pushing the pedestrians, pushing the cyclists, pushing all of them in. They have to find their nook and corner to navigate the system, whereas the cars and big automobiles occupying. So this is exactly what is happening in water and sanitation space, and we can't allow this to happen. Now our panelists have left a couple of very powerful messages, what is called GESI lens. Henceforth, we're going to use this gender equity and social lens in all our actions. Number one. Number two, RAI framework, resources, agency, and institutional structures. Remember these acronyms. Acronyms are very, very important so that it will stick with us. So Jesse and RAI. And there are quick wins that we can start with. One is the data. Second is infrastructure planning. As we have seen, Anjuji has presented, Malini has presented. Participation in every actions, we can bring in greater participation so that we can do justice to everybody, and also indexing, Jesse indexing or gender indexing as Anjuji has presented, and then we can move into child-friendly indexing and various other things. So these are some quick wins all of us have to initiate even before we call it as gender mainstreaming or gender transformative actions. I think the small beginnings can be made, quick wins can be initiated, and I think that is the purpose of exposing ourselves to this session. Thank you very much. Great evening. And Dr. Rashri, any announcements, any big announcements, any
So
other?
before going to that, is just, shall we ask the initial question again to
Yes,
Yes.
please do that. Please do that.
Yeah, I'm just launching the poll. So let's see now what we can.
So now the question is gender equity, social inclusion integral to our sanitation service delivery plan? Are we doing it, or do we need to do more? If you have understood the question, are we doing it correctly, or do we need to do more?
Okay, we got 45% of the responses.
So there is a slight dip, not very much dip. So our group is very, very adamant and very strong, powerful. They're already doing it. So I think we can't disagree with them. But I think the idea is to do more. Dil mange more, as she says. Absolutely right. Thank you very much, Dr. Banerjee. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Just a small announcement for the next session. Our next session would be on Monday, 3rd October, same time, instead of Saturday, what we had planned. We will share you the change in the WhatsApp group also, so that you don't forget about it. Just a small session. Same thing, Saturday, what was to happen, we would be doing it on Monday, 4 to 5:30. That's the only change right now. And our next session would be on frameworks and tools for sanitation planning. We'll see you again Monday. In the meantime, keep interacting in the WhatsApp group. Slido is not being used much. We want more people to use the Slido. We want questions. We are expecting questions, and please, yeah. Thank you so much.